What's up, you creepy fucks, and welcome to the Let's Talk Horror Channel podcast, and welcome to the Creep Zone, where we have very honest, in-depth, unrated conversations about something from the world of horror. And this episode I'm really excited about because it is the start of the year, and it is almost pretty much the start of the year that you can almost expect from the rest of it. Me and my guest, we've already sort of spoken a little bit about it, but basically with this show, everybody sort of knows, if you listen to the show, you watch the show, you know that I don't really pick the episodes that much. What I do is I ask whoever my guest is going to be, I ask them to send me over a big old list as long as they can, and I will pick one from that list. That way I know that we're all going to enjoy something that we're going to talk about. And a lot of the time from those lists, I tend to try and pick movies that I think that is going to be like a broad sort of thing where a lot of, everyone's going to sort of enjoy that conversation. Well, this episode is a prime example where I've not given a fuck, and I don't give a fuck anymore because this episode is, obviously you would have seen it in the title and everything, is all about a movie called Overlord, where a lot of you, when you've seen this, you're probably like, what the fuck is Overlord? And we're going to get into absolutely everything that Overlord is. What I can tell you already is that it is a fantastic movie, and we're going to go into why. And we're going to go into why this is a movie that you should have seen, but also I get why people probably wouldn't have seen it, because it is a certain type of movie that a lot of people might not like, unless you're into it, but then it becomes so much more. And what it becomes so much more of is definitely a horror adjacent movie that we're going to get into. And with me on this episode, I have with me Hootie, who is from the Horror Ball movie. I get it wrong every fucking time.
Every time.
Last episode. Every fucking time. The Horror Ball Film School podcast.
Boom.
Yes, I fucking did it. Once. That would be the only time this episode I get that. But last time you came on the show, I fucked it up loads then anyway. But Hootie is back on my show. Hello, how are you, you handsome devil?
What's going on, BP? I'm happy to be back in the Creep Zone talking about, like you said, a film that people haven't seen, and I don't know why.
Yeah, it's weird. I was thinking about this as well, because when I'm watching it, sometimes I get a bit frustrated because I'm like, I want more people to see this. I don't understand why people haven't seen it, like yourself. But then at the same time, and we will get into it, it is mostly almost about an hour into the movie. It's also mostly more like Saving Private Ryan than it is any of the other sort of thing. It's like, not in regards to, what I mean is it's essentially a war movie. It's essentially a war action movie that ends up becoming or having horror moments in it. But I think the reason why it works is that it's a very well blended, put together movie that does that very well, which obviously we will talk to. I don't know whether you think that that's right. I don't.
It is. If you think about the time period, this was produced by J.J. Abrams at the peak of his powers. He had done Star Trek, he had done Super 8, so his name was attached to it, and like, it is a dude flick at heart, if you really think about it, like you said, until an hour in, and then it becomes a real blood fest. Yeah,
you're right. It is. It's very much. I can see why there's a reason why people didn't see this, because I think a lot of the way that it was set up, especially with the trailers and so on, or the way that it was promoted, it felt, and obviously it is a war movie, so it looks like a war movie, so that already automatically might put people off, because I feel like war movies you have to be a certain cinema goer or a cinema viewer to really want to be somebody that enjoys war movies. Like, they're not for everyone. So I think the difficulty with something like Overlord is that already, because it's like essentially a World War II movie, it's not for everyone. But the sad thing about that is that then it means people don't watch something that's actually very good.
To that point, I'll recommend this a lot. I would recommend your listeners watch the Overlord trailers, because they are fantastic. I've seen a lot of bad horror trailers. Looking at you, Texas Chainsaw 3, that's being awful. These had some great campaigns.
Yeah, you were right. They did. The trailers were really good, and that really sort of set you up for going, actually, like, if they're going to be like doing a World War II horror movie, then like I'm fully on board for, to enjoying it. And like you mentioned as well, J.J. Abrams in the middle of his 500 million Paramount picture deal or whatever he was on when he was like the fucking shit, and now he's just assigned a new one for like way less than that. But but yeah, this is like at the peak of his powers, like you were saying, and he was like putting his name to things. He was like the next Spielberg, and I mean, he made some great stuff. He put his name to some good stuff, but then I don't know, what do we even hear of him anymore? I don't even know the last thing that I heard of J.J. Abrams.
I think the last time I heard he was working for DC. Is that correct? And doing something there.
Oh, I think DC. I think that's James Gunn. I think that's the guy that made the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I think.
Okay, I get those two mixed up a lot.
Yeah, they're the same bloody person.
They have similar.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so as I said, we're talking about Overlord. We've already got into a little bit about it, but we're going to get way more into it. The film was released in 2018, so it's not an old movie. It's still, what's that, like 6 years old? So it's still very relevant. It's directed by Julius Avery. Now, I should have looked up other movies that he made before this. I have no clue. I don't know if you know of any movies that he made, because I haven't got a clue.
I looked him up. I thought this guy might have been elevated from this film because he's obviously one of J.J. Abrams' boys. He went on to direct The Samaritan with Sylvester Stallone.
Oh, Stallone, yeah.
I watched it. It was not good. And then he did The Pope's Exorcist, which I have not seen and probably won't see.
No, don't bother. It's just Russell Crowe being Russell Crowe fighting. Yeah, that's it. But yeah, I watched The Samaritan as well with Stallone, and it's just my love for Stallone that drives me to his movies. And then
that's why I watched it.
Most of the time you're let down now, unless he pulls one out the bag. But yeah, you're exactly right. Like when you watch, and as I said, we're going to get into it all, but when you watch this movie, like this feels like it's come from a very accomplished director, and you expected it to, when you look at this guy's filmography, not that I did, but I'm sure just by what you're saying, it's not something that you would look at it and go, yeah, that's an impressive one. You would like, and you would, when you watch this movie, I genuinely would have thought that this person who's made it would have had an existing really good history of, of projects, and then what they're working on afterwards, I would have expected the same thing, but I haven't really heard of anything for this guy since.
It makes me think, as I sit back and look at that list, how much did JJ have his hand in his cookie jar?
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? You never know, because this does feel very J.J. Abrams.
Yes.
There's something about it. I mean, there's probably less lens flare than he would have probably liked. And maybe that's why he didn't want it to work as much, because we know how much every single shot he does has to have lens flare.
Must.
It's an absolute must. Like, that's J.J. Abrams' film school. Like, if you want, that's what I look for. If I ever make a movie, I want to achieve the J.J. Abrams film school of lens flare.
Chef's kiss.
It's Chef's kiss of lens flare. That's it. I just want to see screenshots and say, how is this lens flare? Does it work for you? But the film itself is starring. It's got a big cast. They are mostly unknowns. Well, people that I don't know, apart from one of them, who I will be gushing and talking about throughout the whole entirety of this. But first up, is starring Wyatt Russell. Those that don't know, Wyatt Russell is the absolutely legendary and iconic and one of the most handsome men that's ever lived. Kurt Russell's son. Does he look like him? Absolutely. Does he sound like him? Absolutely. And does that make everything even better? Yes, absolutely. It's also starring Jovan Adepo, which is obviously completely wrong. Mathilde Olivier, John Margaro, Pilar Azabak. That's wrong. I'm going to get these wrong. I'm fucking English. I'm common. I don't know what I'm talking about. And then, of course, Eddie from Stranger Things is in this for like 2 minutes, like near the start. And then he's gone.
Did not realize that was him when I saw him in the film.
Oh, really?
It's because without the long hair, he's got a helmet on, and it's like a little child. I'm like, oh, I didn't know it was even Eddie.
Yeah, see, they get their start somewhere, and now he's a huge, big star in like one of the new Quiet Place movies, and then he's going to be in another Marvel movie, and obviously Stranger Things. I don't know if he is coming back. He might do, but we'll see. But yeah, he's a big star. It's always funny when you see those little people like they pop up, and you're like, oh, now we know where he got his starts.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the entire cast, the biggest actors from this are him and Bokeem Woodbine, who's in it for like 10 minutes.
Yes, yeah. I don't even know who that is. Who's that in it?
I always jokingly say that he's the bigger Dave Chappelle. He looks just like Dave Chappelle.
I thought it was Dave Chappelle.
I know you
did. yeah. But yeah, you're right, because every time, he's fucking awesome in this though as well. Like unfortunately, the moment that he's in, he's like a proper like hoorah like sort of thing. Like so fucking cool. But yeah, so this is 6.6 on IMDb and 82% on Rotten Tomatoes. Google synopsis wise, we've got towards the end of World War II, American paratroopers set out to destroy a German radio tower. Soon enough, things take a murky turn when they come across a vicious secret. That's fine. I'm happy with that. Google have done their job for once. It doesn't give too much away, and it sets it up quite well. Normally they're a piece of shit, but they've done a good job. Obviously they hired someone else in to do that one. But yeah, so we're going to get right into the movie. But first of all, one thing that I always ask. Now, I wasn't going to ask this because it's a newer movie. This normally works with sort of older movies and so on. Normally, I always have on the show, when did you first see the movie? But it's new. So with me, I watched it on, I think it was Netflix, and then I got it on 4K. But with yourself, you've got a bit of an interesting story with it.
So, again, you said this was 2018, and as life goes on, you move away from all of your buddies, as have I, as I'm sure that you have. But this film was one of the last films I remember all of my buddies getting together. We went to like some bar down the street, got food, and then went to the opening night showing of Overlord because we were just excited as hell to see it. And it was a great time then. We all loved the film. And then I have not watched this movie since that night.
Oh, okay.
Until the show. And it holds up to me.
Good. I was getting worried then because I was just about to be like, oh, I haven't seen it and now it's shit. Because it wouldn't be the first time that's happened. And it won't be the last. But yeah, no, I'm glad that it's one of those movies that holds up. And to be fair, I will probably say I'm similar with you as well. When I first watched it, obviously I watched it, as I said, I think it was on Netflix or Prime, one of them. And then I recently watched it again for the prep for this. And it does really well hold up. It definitely is one of those movies that it's good to have a separation of time between it. Because it is a reasonably long movie, but it does take a while to get into what you expect the movie to be. Especially like from looking at the trailers and stuff, you expect it to be something, but it's a lot more. It's a lot more war driven. It's a lot more story driven around that aspect of it before we start going into like the Reanimator shit and and stuff like that. And but then that's what I like about it is that you almost feel like you're getting two movies out of it, and that's what's quite cool. You're getting like a war movie where it's a it feels very realistic. It feels very dark, which I'll talk about as well. But then it ends up blending and merging into something that's a little bit more Hollywood, a little bit more like Saving the Day, a little bit more horror-like, which is obviously what my partner was waiting for the whole fucking movie.
I don't know how many of these type of horror films you've seen where like the Nazi horror genre is kind of a small niche genre, and they're usually all kind of at the B movie level of films. This is the first time I can remember seeing it with a decent budget and just actually a studio getting behind a horror Nazi film.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, when you think of, if you're somebody that just like enjoys cinema in general, irrelevant of genre, and obviously I do all this that's all horror and stuff, and I've sort of put myself in just that bracket of doing horror. But what I like about this movie is that it does open it up. So if you are somebody that's just like a general fan of cinema, like I am as well. Like I should have just done a podcast that's talking about all the different genres rather than corner myself to doing horror. But I love horror so much that's why I did it. But what I love is that if you are a fan of cinema and you're like, I like war movies, I like horror movies and so on like that, this is like a really appealing movie because it does feel different. It does feel like a little bit on its own. And that is what makes it exciting because you're like, oh, okay, like a World War II set horror movie that looks like it has zombies and shit like that in it. Is that's exciting. So I think that that's one of the things that like I was once again to my surprise that no one had really like spoken about it.
I wasn't going to bring this up, but it kind of kept coming back in my mind while I was watching this, and then you wore the shirt for the show. This is a modern day Predator.
Yeah.
Because in the Predator, the first hour, nothing really happens.
And then it switches.
And then boom.
Yeah, and that's it. And and you're right. And I mean, I thought exactly the same thing when I was like after I watched it and when I was doing my prep for my notes and stuff, like all my notes for the prep and everything. It was one of those things where I'm like, this does feel very Predator-esque, like less 80s and more 1944. But but yeah, it definitely has that sort of thing where it feels like that Predator influence is definitely there. Like it might be a different aesthetical or different bad guy, and it's war and it's horrible people and it's all that sort of stuff and it's humans doing these things and fucking crazy serums and shit like that. But yeah, you're right, like same with Predator, it's all about the build up and the build up until it goes mental at the end and then we get like the big payoffs. But we'll talk about it because there's always going to be good, there's always going to be bad. A part of this show is talking about both of it rather than just going, this is the best movie anyone's ever seen and everybody's got to see it. There's always going to be good and there's always going to be bad. So we'll talk about that as well. When I do these conversations, one thing that's always, I always struggle with starting is like how you start. But this one is really easy to start getting into the movie because of how fucking good the opening scene in this movie is. This is like, I would say that this is like almost up there as like an all-timer of opening scenes where like if people are always like online going like give me a good opening scene that's not like Ghost Ship or something like that, or Final Destination 2, something like that. Like I always pop this in there every now and again and being like, have you seen this start of Overlord? Because it's really, in every aspect, it's really, really fucking cool.
And it's the dynamic of all the soldiers meeting each other, some for the first time, like with Wyatt or Ford, and it's just like your heart starts pumping from the first shot of the film, and then you got Woodbine coming in and doing, like you said, the big hoorah speech, and it's like, man, and there's bullets all over the place.
Yeah, that's it. And what I like about that scene is that it does go on sort of longer than I expected, and that builds those tension levels for you because you're waiting for shit to go wrong, and the longer that you're waiting for shit to go wrong, the more tense that you get watching it because you're like, something's going to happen, like they're going to go down, like it's going to get shot up, it's going to get blown up, something's going to happen. But it keeps sort of not happening. They're building these, like you said, like the relationships between the characters. They're sort of showing you who's going to be the ones that die and who are going to be the ones that are going to end up surviving. You're going to be on the journey with them. And then, like you said, you get Wyatt Russell, who's like the cool guy looking out the window with a toothpick and shit like that. And you're like, you're fucking cool. And, and then
he's the seasoned soldier that looks the exact same age as everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've been doing this for 40 years, like when he was born. He came out the womb fighting. He's cool. And then obviously the main guy, I don't remember his name. I think he's played by Jovan Adepo, if that's his right name. I don't know. But I can't remember his name in the movie because I'm so bad at them. Boys, that's it. But he's like more of the, the reluctant hero, so to speak, is in, we find that he will have it in him and he's going to get it in him. But at the start, the nerves and hesitancy of the fact that it's war and he's got to do, things that, are uncomprehendable, to survive. And I think they do put that really well across in this movie. I think the way this movie starts, like, even though it's a movie, and I wasn't in the World War II or anything like this. So it's very difficult for me to like go, this is very real. But I think as somebody that's watching the movie, I think they do a very good job of making you understand the threat levels that they could have been under in the war at that time, doing what they were doing, and the threat level that they're all under in regards to like when they're going through on this plane and then the things happen. I think they do a very good job of that throughout the movie, of like establishing that they are in not good territory for them to be in, and that adds the extra like element of like of tension and dread, where you're like, if you have a character that you like, it's quite unpredictable and you don't know where it's going to go.
Yes, and they keep referencing to your point about how critical this march into France is by referencing. They don't really say it, but they are referencing D-Day. This was on D-Day, and so you hear the D-Day, and that's like one of the most probably recognized war moments in history, and so that kind of elevates the situation of like, oh, this is that day. Yeah,
you're right. Yeah, it elevates it, and. So the opening scene, it's absolutely stunning. Like, you've got all these big planes, going through the sky, and you can see the lineup, like everything there. Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, what's so interesting about the director, or potentially, like you said, how much J.J. Abrams might have had involved in it, because the cinematography, even from the start of this, like, is crazy stunning. Like, it looks so good. And you've got amazing shots of these planes going in the sky. Then they start going through the clouds where but you're seeing everything happening like out the window while they're on it. And it's adding to that sort of sense of realism. So it's really, from the start, you almost get a sense of like, oh, like this is a real movie. Like, this isn't like a movie where they're like, we're going to set it in a war, but we're going to like have like them in uniform and that's about it. Or like one war car, like an army car over in the corner that, is there as a set prop. Like, this is like a really well, thought out representation through like cinematography of war and what it was like. And I really enjoy that it feels very big in scope. And we don't obviously really get that as much anymore. And obviously this movie does feel very big in scope. And I really appreciate that. From the start, we get that. We're introduced to the characters. Obviously, their plane sort of gets shot up. They blow up. They go down. And then you've got loads of really cool shots in the air. And that's crazy as well, when he's going through the air. And everything is going on in the background. Planes blowing up, guns, bombs, everything going off. And you're like drawn into it straight away. I don't know if you were, but I was completely drawn into it.
And that's the moment that I had when I first saw the film and when I rewatched it here this week. The only thing I will call out is this is 2018, so like you said, not that old of a film. And there's some pieces of CGI in this film that don't hold up. And that kind of surprises me, considering how new it is.
Yeah, you're right. There are, some of it looks like really, really good at the start. But there's the odd moment where you're like, oh, okay, like maybe some touch-ups or something needed to be done on certain things. And yeah, you're right. There's some things, or like sometimes the real-life characters aren't playing with the CGI elements as well as they should do. It doesn't line up as properly as well. Like, I found that throughout the movie as well, where, the integration of like using real life to CGI doesn't necessarily line up as well as it should do, like you're saying, especially for a movie from 2018. But then at the same time, we're still in 2024 and they're making films look like pieces of shit.
Yeah.
So it's mad. Do you know what? It's really funny as well, because we watched Jurassic Park last night. We always watch Jurassic Park. It's one of my daughter's favourite movies. And when I tell her, and the older she gets, like trying to say to her how much of that movie was actually CGI and how much of that they actually created the programs that helped create CGI, and yet it looks better than so much today, is insane. Like, there's moments in Jurassic Park that you don't know that CGI that are, and you're like, that's mental. Like, how are they not getting it right today? It's fucking weird.
It's so fascinating, because Jurassic Park is a gorgeous film, like you said.
Yeah.
And it is from, what, 93?
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's mad. 93 at the start of what CGI was and to become. Like I said, like the people that were working on it were the people that were creating CGI and methods and programs and the understanding of how to do it. And yeah, now we're back in 2024 and we're getting water people or whatever and blue Smurfs underwater and stuff and it's and it still doesn't look right. Like we're still in that uncanny valley. And yeah, you're right. Like this movie is a bit like that, where in 2018, as much as a lot of it is really, really well done, like a lot of the plane stuff at the start, but then there's the odd moment you're like, yeah, maybe like work on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
the good thing, it doesn't take you out of it.
it's a gorgeous opening scene. I won't take anything away from it. I just wanted to,
Yes.
say like some aspects could have been, like you said, take a little bit more time to touch up.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, so they obviously, we've got all these soldiers. We're introduced to the main people. You've got Ford, which is Wyatt Russell. You've got Boyle. Was that right? No,
Boyce.
Boyce, Boyle. That's somebody completely different. I think that's Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But Boyce, but Boyce is in it as well. You've got some of the other ones that obviously I'm not going to remember their name. But they're basically, what happens is that when they're going down, there's only a very small knit sort of group of them. You've got, I think there's like 4 or 5 of them altogether. I think all together at the start when they start their journey, and then they're basically they have. What I like about this is that they have a mission. Well, okay, what I like and don't like about this, and I'll get into this a little bit later, is that they're a small group and they have their mission, and they're still going to go on this mission because, as I said on Google Synopsis, that they basically got to go and destroy like this German radio tower and so on like that. But irrelevant of how many numbers there are, where they're, like I said, there's only like 4 or 5 of them. They're doing that very like common, not American, but very common action movie sort of thing, where they're like, even though there's only us, we're still going to save everyone and end the war. And I mean, I don't know whether that was the mentality back then, but it's definitely the movie mentality that you get.
I mean, you can sit there and think about it, and maybe they could have turned around and went back to a different platoon. But I mean, they got dropped in the middle of nowhere, and you're in France. Yeah. Like, what are you supposed to do?
I suppose, yeah. And especially if you've got, Wyatt Russell going around going, we're going to fucking go there, and you do what I say. Yeah, exactly. Do what I fucking say. But we lose one of them quite quickly because they end up walking on a mine, on a landmine, and that's never nice. So then they have to single file for a little while until they can get out of those in a big proper explosion, which was nice and not nice to see, because it's always cool. I love explosions in movies, but it's never nice if it's just somebody getting blown up by a landmine.
It was well done because they gave that character, and like I said, I don't remember his name, but he was talking about how he was going to write a memoir about the war.
Yeah, that's it.
A book, and then boom.
Yeah, that's it. Straight away, unexpected. And once again, that goes to what I was saying earlier on about the unpredictability of this movie, but also what I like is that it's not just about the unpredictability of the movie, it's about the unpredictability of war. And I think like how that they put that into this movie in these moments, before it starts getting like incredibly far-fetched and so on and goes into territory that isn't the real stuff. But I do like how they deliver at the start the unpredictability of what it must have been like to be at war, so to speak. Possibly I wasn't there, but but the film is definitely an unpredictable one. But they go off, they come across some woman. I'm going to run through the synopsis very quickly, but they bump into a woman who I believe is French, possibly. I could be wrong. Most of the time I forget this anyway. Boyce actually speaks French, which is always helpful for them. They don't explain where he knows it from. Oh no, they do. I can't remember where they said he was, but he knows French. No, but he knows French, which means he can speak to the woman. They go to this woman's house, and then she's got a boy there, but she's also got a grandmother who's definitely absolutely gross and fucked up and scaly, and she's a bit like Lizard from Spider-Man. But yeah, we get introduced to them, and then that basically is the core group of the characters in the movie, and then it leads on to all the fucked up shit that happens. So going from there, this movie, I would actually say, to its core, of course, when you do a movie about war, it's always going to be dark. You can't make anything light-hearted about something that's not light-hearted. You can't make something light-hearted about travesty and everything like that, and horrible things. But they do go to very dark places in this movie, I think, as well. One of the moments is one of the German soldiers who's like the main bad of the movie. Has definitely basically been making the lady have sex with him and so on like that, and that's like one of the moments in the movie that's very dark as well. But there's a lot of moments throughout the movie that sort of show the darkness of it, which also might be another thing that might put people off. I don't know, because it does go to some dark places in this movie.
It's definitely not a fun watch in regards to like some of the stuff really happened. So that's like you said, it's kind of hard to watch that. But if you can detach yourself from that and just realize you're watching a horror film and that you're about to see some really cool creature effects, I think you would enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. But so we get that where we are, introduced to the lady. All these horrible. We've got the big bad in the movie, which is this German guy who ends up getting his face blown off, which is really cool. And we talk about all the practical effects and everything like that. And then it essentially becomes about the fact that they're still trying to destroy this radio tower, and that is their mission, that is their job, and that is for the rest of the movie. To go into the movie in some more detail, one thing is, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but this movie feels like a computer game. It's like it feels like, I can't remember the name of it. I think there's like a game called like Wolfenstein or something like that. Yeah. I don't really play games, but this movie feels like a computer game from like where it goes from like, it feels like it's a adventure action horror computer game where you've gone from here, you've landed here, and you've got to get to here to destroy it, but then you've got these villains on the way, and the way that it's presented as well, it feels very computer game like. That could just be me. I don't know.
No, I didn't think about that, but yeah, it does have that Wolfenstein Castlevania type feel to it, to where the whole part of the movie, once they land, is getting inside of this one building. That's all.
Yeah.
Mowing through the building and then blowing it up, which is like the premise of a lot of video games.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm surprised that they didn't actually just turn it into a video game, because it would work as a game, but then also at the same time, it would be an awesome game. Like, how have they not turned this into a video game? Literally, it's like a war horror game. That's mad that they haven't. And now when they do, we won't get any money from it.
I don't mean to go on like a side tangent, but back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, movies got games all the time. There was a Terminator 2 game that was fantastic. And, Toy Story got a game that was good when I was a kid. And the last movie game that I remember coming out that was worth anything was Mad Max.
Yeah, I did play that. I don't play games often, but I played Mad Max, and that was just fun driving around like a madman doing some things. Yeah, but yeah, you're right. They don't do them, and the thing is like Mad Max obviously is an open world sort of thing that really opens it up. But it's very surprising that they didn't do. There's a lot of I don't know what they're called, the shooting games, so to speak, and. But those sort of games, this movie would like really well lend itself to those sort of things where you've got to do this and you've got to get there, but then along the way bad things happen, and then you've got these zombie things, that are regenerated people and so on like that, and then it becomes, like you said, your purpose is to destroy this and so on. It feels like a computer game, and definitely probably should have been. But what I think one of the things that helps that is that this movie, as I said, like the start, but all the way throughout, this is a very good-looking movie. Like, it's definitely a J.J. Abrams style looking movie, but it does use the budget that they had. I think that it does use it very well. Like, it's a very cinematic movie. Like, there are moments where I was just like, this reminds me a bit like Indiana Jones. And I think obviously a lot of that is to do with the fact that there's a war setting and so on like that, or and armies and stuff like that. But yeah, there's there's something a little bit old school about this. Like, it's a very good modern interpretation of old school cinema. And that's how I sort of feel about this movie in regards to like the aesthetics.
And on top of that, to that old school movie feel, is they use the settings to the max potential. Like they're inside of Chloe's house a long time. They're inside of the church a long time. They're inside the plane a long time.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they do. They make the most of these settings. But yeah, it feels very old school, this movie, but yet for like a modern day sort of audience and so on. And then one of the other things that I've found really, really cool about this is, and you don't, once again, this is something as well where it feels a little bit like, I talk about this quite a bit, like how a lot of old school cinematography and cinema and the way things are filmed and directed, I feel like it's a bit of a lost art, because a lot of the time now movies feel like I watched a trailer for something the other day and I can't remember what it was. And I think your expectations from like a comedy, you don't expect it to be like a gorgeous movie. But I watched something the other day and it was just like a pick up a camera, point and shoot. And you're like, there is no artistry behind this whatsoever. And that's how I feel with like a lot of cinema now, where that artistry of like cinematography, lighting, the way you set up a shot, whether it's wide, whether it's this and so on. I feel like a lot of that is lost now, and I do talk about that quite a bit. In this movie, it's not. But one of the things that does get lost is how sound design works with the scene that it's in. The sound design and the score in this movie are really, really good. Like, it really complements what's happening with the movie, and it merely complements how you're feeling when you're watching those scenes. They do the sound design in this is really, really good.
Could not have said it better. Like to the point of the soldier stepping on the mine, the explosion just like rattles your speakers, and then to a quieter sound would be the aunt in the room who's like constantly whining, but it sounds really good.
Yeah, it's a really well put together sound design, and as I said, like the score, like what I love, when I really enjoy a movie is when I'm sitting there, I almost feel like, or like when a score is really good or sound design is really good, is when you almost feel like you're in the room with the person that's doing it, who's also in the room when they're watching it, and they're going, so it needs to feel like this. And that's when I'm like, okay, sound design works so well when people are doing it like that, because a lot of the time, people will be just putting, music here that doesn't work and so on like that, just because it might be like a popular track, so they shove it in, and you're like, yeah, but that doesn't work for the movie. Or like sound design and so on, like it's not something that people don't look at so much, so they don't understand the impact of like you said, like a landmine. Like when that happens, it's so unpredictable, but the way that it sounds, and it's such a, it's so unpredictable, and the way that it sounds is so like big and harsh that you're like, shit, like, you don't expect it, and it helps you. The sound design helps you with that. Whereas some movies that I watch now, the sound design is almost non-existent, and you're like, that's a shame, because that really is something that's like feels a bit lost to me, because in a movie like this, you watch it and you're like, wow, like that's incredible score, incredible sound, and what they're doing is lending itself to every scene in the movie, and that's what every movie should be trying to accomplish. But it sort of doesn't, and I feel like we I love it when we get a movie like this, where you're like, this is, once again, it goes back to the credit of the director and so on, where it's a very competently put together movie. That I still don't understand how we didn't go on and make other things, but I suppose that's on him. Maybe he had enough of fucking doing this one.
He lost JJ.
He lost JJ, is it? Yeah, or as we said, not enough lens flare. In regards to performances, you can't fault the performances in this one. Actually, you can in a way. I'll come straight out and say I don't necessarily think the person that played Chloe, I didn't think that she was great. I thought that she was there to be very pretty, which she was, but also there are people out there that could have interpreted the emotion of what was happening in the movie better than what she could have. So I feel really bad saying that, but also I don't give a shit, because it is what it is. But at the same time, when you've got the other cast around her, like going for it fully. Like, and every person, once again, this movie, it becomes about a lost artistry. That's why I like watching movies like these that surprise me, because once again, this is a movie that you have all these different characters in it, and every character is a different character, and that none of them blend into one. They all talk differently, they all behave differently, they all react differently, and that's what I love about this movie, is that it has like that ensemble piece of different actors playing different people. And once again, like now you get a lot of movies where everybody is the same person essentially, but saying different things, and once again you lose that. Like, you know, you can't side with a character because of this, or you can't say that this person gave a really good performance but so did this person, because they all feel like, a lot of the time in movies, they're all put into one. Very, very rarely now do I watch movies with an ensemble cast where I can almost differentiate them. It's almost like when you watch, say, something like, I don't know if you saw it, like Bodies, 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 or something like that. But like a cast like that, they're very good in the movie, but it's very difficult sometimes to differentiate the different cast and so on in it, because if they feel all very similar, they have the same sort of vibe. And I know it's probably more purposeful for the movie, but that's just an example. Whereas in this, everybody feels like their own individual person on their own, who's been on their journey, who's on this journey together now, and how they deal with that is all differently. And I really miss that, because I don't think we get that as much anymore either.
I would agree with that. We do get a lot of films to where the plot is more important than the character development, which is getting lost, because some people call character development boring, which I don't think it is.
No.
For example, like in this film, the dynamic between Bryce and Ford, you understand it. They both have their own moral compasses, which will come into play later on. And like, to your point, Chloe's good. I forget the actress's name, but she doesn't. I don't know if it's how she delivers her dialogue, but I don't ever feel like she's worried or really scared, or like the gravity of the situation seems much higher than she's presenting.
Yeah. So like for me, like a big example is, so she's quite clearly like, she's obviously a strong-willed person, a strong-willed character, and you sort of get that from her. But there are moments in it where the vulnerability, which is a word that I can't pronounce, but you know what I mean. But her being vulnerable doesn't come across as much as it should be. For example, like I already mentioned, the main sort of bad guy of the movie is obviously doing horrible things to her, or forcing her into horrible things. So to essentially say, I'll keep you and your family alive if you do these horrible things for me. That's essentially what it is. But you get that threat from him, and you're like, he's a fucking piece of shit for doing it. But with her, I never felt that threat that it could have been from her, where somebody else in that role might have made you feel more for that person. Like, obviously, of course, you feel for her, because you're like, what a horrible thing for her to have to do. But the only sense that you really got from her was that she was strong-willed, and she was only doing it, she was doing it to save them and all, which is right. But there just wasn't that extra level or that extra layer to her character. So although she's good in it, she doesn't really put her foot wrong. But it's just interesting when you get like the different levels of performances in it. Like, you've got the guy who's essentially like the comic relief of the movie, that I've completely forgotten his name, but the proper New Yorker, and so you know what I mean.
Tibbet, I think
guy.
Tibbet.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and he's just like being horrible to the kid. It's a baseball kid, something like that. And he's like essentially like the comic relief of the movie, but you get him and you understand him, and then you like the fact that he builds up this warmth in a very small space of time. He becomes this dick to like build it, like saving a kid's life, and that's what I really like about when you get characters like that, like you're saying, character development, but for what we're watching that on screen. You got a guy that's like, you think he's just a flat out like, piece of shit who's on the plane at the start, taking the piss out of everyone, being a dick, and then he becomes, a lifesaver of a child at the end, and I like that. But with obviously her, you don't get that so much. So There's a lot of people out there who won't give a shit about that. They'll just be like, it's just watch the fucking movie. But in my brain, I have to think about shit like that.
Right.
Otherwise, I can't podcast. What would be the fucking point? Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, one of the things that I did put here is because obviously I do have to have like the odd critique, so to speak, that this movie is quite a long movie. And like we have already mentioned, that it does take a long time to get into what the story essentially is. So when it takes, I think I looked at my like press the pause button, and I think I was like 42 to 43 minutes into the movie before we even got a sense of what the threat was, like what this extra threat was. Not just the war and everything that was going on around them, but the fact that it becomes about fucking mutants, like like that sort of stuff. So and for me, like that's like the very interesting part that makes it separate from obviously a lot of other movies, and that's what really makes it very, very interesting. So for me, I would have liked them to have moved that a lot closer, maybe like not like nearly an hour, if not an hour into the movie before we start getting a sense of like all the fucked up shit that's going to happen. For me, I would have liked them to move that a little bit forward, because we get the war stuff, and we understand that this is it. They've got, they've got to do this. This is their mission. But I would like to have them to have gone on their mission a bit sooner, so then we could have got up to the fucked up stuff a bit sooner.
I think if they could have toyed with that scene to where they're walking through the woods and they find that pile of like contorted bones, and they're like, this isn't human. If that could have been a mutant that ran at them and they had to shoot it, that would like get the gears turning a little sooner.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly right. Yeah, or like either that, or you have that moment, but then not long after that moment, you've got like the moment you're saying where it becomes like things. So like the elevation, the ramping up of the shit that's about to happen is constantly progressing throughout the movie. Whereas what we do get is almost like it's a war movie. It's about the conflict of war and all the bad things that happen, and then like nearly an hour into it, that's when we start getting like it just goes from like 1 to 10 almost, where it's just like this is the shit that's happening, and people can get revived after they're dead, and their heads can be snapped off, and and shit like that. So it almost like it doesn't ramp up the tension of going, there's some fucked up shit happening. You get, like you mentioned at the start, you get like, oh, these are really fucked up bones. Like, what's all this? Oh, I don't know. Like, even Wyatt Russell's just like, oh, they're just dog bones or whatever. And then he looks at it and he'd be like, what the fuck's that? And that's cool. But then after that, nothing really happens to in relevance to that or that concept or that idea of what the rest of the movie is until like nearly an hour into it. And at that point, you're like, oh, thank fuck. Like, now something's happening that's not, a full-on war movie that I didn't. When I first watched it, I didn't like, as much as I really like this movie, I didn't expect it to be as much of a war movie until we then go into the horror adjacent moments of it, and then when it goes there, then we get like a completely different movie, like you're saying, Predator-esque. We get a completely different movie when we get to those moments where we get fucking mental gnarly kills. We get great practical effects as well, which look awesome. A lot of it was done more practical than what I thought. I think the guy that has his head like knocked back or whatever, and you see his bones and that come out, and that apparently a lot of that was more practical than what I thought. I thought they would have done it like CGI, but apparently from what I read, a lot of that was all practical, which does surprise me. Which is awesome. Oh, good. I'm not talking shit then. I could just make shit up. But yeah, so like, we get all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so you've got this story that is constantly evolving, and then you get like quite far into it before it starts becoming the horror film that I think a lot of people were expecting it to be or wanted it to be. But like I said, when it gets there, it does really go for it. You get great action scenes. You get great sort of fight scenes. You get a fantastic scene between Wyatt Russell and the sort of the big bad guy German of the movie. And Wyatt Russell obviously is, you know, about as Snake Plissken at this point as you possibly can be. Like, he's sounding as much like his dad as he possibly could with his gravelly voice.
When he
like that.
They hang up Wapner at some point, and he whispers in his ear, "You're not going to win this one." I was like, "Is that?"
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. That's it. This one's for me. Okay. And you just accept. You imagine at one point in the movie he's going to get an eye patch at some point, and just go around. Follow me.
And that a sweet leather jacket that Plissken always had.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's. I find it really odd watching movies with Wyatt Russell because there are moments. So I don't know if you remember this, but one of the first things that I saw him in, he was in an episode of, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's that show Black Mirror, and you know, really good program. And he was in, I think it was like in the first season, they did an episode where it was like where he's in a computer game that's not real, that ends up sort of becoming real because it becomes more fucked up and so on like that. And it's like a VR thing, but it's like a crazy realistic thing. But it's a really cool idea, concept, really good episode, like one of my favourite episodes still. But there's moments in it that I didn't know that he was Kurt Russell's son when I watched it. And when I found out it was Kurt Russell's son, it blew my mind because there's moments in that episode of Black Mirror where there's shots and he looks so much like Kurt Russell in The Thing that it's crazy. And now when I watch anything with him in, I feel like I'm just watching like a young Kurt Russell do his thing, but in like movies that I'd never seen before. I'm not complaining. I love it.
I'm going to be honest. We just spoke before the show, and you had talked about how much you liked Wyatt Russell, and this is the only film I've ever seen him in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this is my first time. Well, not first time seeing it because I've seen this film before, but like this is the only way that I know this guy.
Oh, really? Well, that's cool. But I mean, to be fair to him, or not to be fair to him, but he hasn't sort of had the sort of career that his dad has so far. So we'll see what happens with him because obviously he is in. I think he's doing Marvel stuff now. I think, which is a bit of, for me, he's a bit of a disappointment because obviously I'm not like a Marvel person sort of thing. So I'm a bit sad by that he hasn't gone on and like, you know, because like they're always talking about remaking, you know, Escape from New York and stuff like that. And you've got like, don't cast anyone else, just take Wyatt Russell and just get him to do it. You know, you don't need anything else. Like Kurt Russell's so great at Snake Plissken, you know, and it was such an influence on so many other things that you might as well just get his son to play him if you're ever going to. But, you know, it probably won't. They'll probably get somebody that like Timothée Chalamet or something to play him.
To that point though, like, we don't have to remake everything that was ever been made before.
Yeah.
Like just
unfortunately, that's it. Yeah, that's it. And I think like, and I spoke about this recently as well. And like, there are certain things where I don't mind, like they're doing like another Return of the Living Dead, and they're revamping Silent Night, Deadly Night, and stuff like that. And for me, I'm like, enough time has passed now that as long as those people that are doing it are going to do it right, I don't mind, because I think they are revisiting the genre, so to speak, where they're like, let's try and create something new with it. But like you're saying as well, like if you're just going to go, we're going to remake Escape from New York, well, you don't need to. Just put that money into something that might be more original, you know, because we can just always keep going back to those things. You know, we can always go back to the original, which we do. It's like if somebody turned around and said, we're going to like completely remake Die Hard, you know, I mean, you're like, well, don't, because we can just go back to the perfect one that there already was, you know? I mean, of course, they made a million other Die Hards afterwards with Bruce Willis, but right. Like, if somebody just turned around and was like, you know, you've got a great movie, and then they're like, we're just going to, well, I mean, it's happening recently anyway, where they're doing American Psycho, and, you know, they're doing Austin Butler's going to be Patrick Bateman and so on like that. But you're like, I mean, I love the original American Psycho, so for me, it's like, don't waste your time on it.
I haven't heard that. So is that a complete reboot?
Yeah, so it looks as though, like, because obviously the way that they sort of get away with it is like, the book is so much more fucked up than the movie. Even though the movie's fucked up, the book itself is so fucked up, and it's got so many messed up moments, especially involving rats, I won't say any more than that because it's fucked up. Just read the book. But the rat stuff and all that sort of stuff is sort of things where you're like, that's too much for the movie. I can't ever imagine Austin Butler doing the things that they do in the book. So to that point, it's like if you're remaking the movie, well then what's the point? But if you're remaking the book, I sort of get it. But what's the point in remaking a book that you probably can't do everything you're going to anyway? Just leave it with the original movie that's fantastic with Christian Bale and then move on and make something original or something new. That's how I feel about it.
Man, just sit down and listen to Huey Lewis and the news and have a good day.
Absolutely, yeah, that's it. Or Phil Collins, Sussudio. So just listen to the soundtrack and then go, yeah, why do we need anything else? Why do we need Elvis Bateman? You know what I mean? Yeah. Because that's the thing as well with these movies as well, is that, you know, Austin Butler, you know, he's a good actor, but it's Austin Butler. So you know, a bit like Chalamet, you know, like if you put those in those sort of movies, you know that you're essentially going to get Austin Butler or Chalamet. Whereas, you know, Christian Bale is a transformative actor. So it's like, you know, who he is as Patrick Bateman is different. Who he is as someone different, you know. So, you know, people like him obviously are exciting when they do movies. And I don't know how exciting Austin Butler is. But to go back to the original point, yeah, stop remaking shit. Do something new. Unless it's reimagining something like, you know, Return of the Living Dead and Silent Night, Deadly Night and stuff like that. But back to...
Stop casting Timothy Chalamet in every movie that's made in Hollywood.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. Like, once again, like, you know, there's a lot of really good actors out there. You know, like actually, to be fair, like someone that I think is pretty good is the guy that I can't remember his name, Glenn Powell. I think his name's Glenn Powell. I think his name is. And I think the reason that I like him a bit is because, like, he is making, like, the big movies, and then some of his other movies that he's doing, like, are quite quirky. Like, he's got one coming out in a bit where it's almost like a comedy sort of thing, and it feels a little bit different to what something like Chalamet and Austin Butler would be doing, because their career is on the up, but it's their career is constantly about almost like playing the same sort of character but within, you know, movies that are better than their performances. You know, like you take like Dune, for example. You know, like those are movies that are considered masterpiece movies, but you probably could have got other people that are very talented in those roles to do the same job as Butler and so on. I know there would be a lot of people out there that completely disagree, but I don't give a fuck.
You just pissed off somebody.
I piss off everyone. So yeah. Also, one of the other things about this movie as well, and that is a little bit of gripe that I have, like, you know, like I said, like it takes a while to get into it. But one of the things that this movie does that a lot of movies that I always find it really funny they do is where, and I mentioned it earlier, that there's only a small group of them that are on this mission. But they're doing, like, they're going around all these places. They've loads of, like, you know, guards and everything like this, but they never ever get found or get shot or anything like that. Like, there's just one of them going around, and obviously for the purpose of the movie, of course that's going to happen, because otherwise they'll be like, oh, there's somebody, he's dead, and then you've got no heroes left to save the day. But this movie does that quite a lot, where it's just like, this person's going to go here, or like the bit where they're saving the kid, you know, and the only person that gets shot is obviously the person that you know is going to get shot, who's saving him. But there's loads of guards. The kid doesn't get shot. There's loads of guards. He doesn't get shot running out there. You know what I mean? So Hollywood has this thing where sometimes realism goes out the window to tell the story, which is fine. But sometimes it gets, like, in my head where I'm like, this is a bit too much, because, like, this isn't a setting where it's like there's only a small group of, like, people and a small group of army. Like, this is war, and there's going to be people around, and you're going to be found either way. And if you don't, obviously you're a lucky one. But it's just weird how sometimes they do that in a movie where they hope that people don't think about it.
This is an example of where, like, it's when Boyce goes into the church or the lab, whatever you want to call it, we're being told that there's an entire army of like 50, 60, 70 Nazis deep. And Boyce isn't shot. Boyce isn't found. and
Yeah,
he's just
that's
there
it. And he has
walking
time
around.
to smash open a gate on the floor, and they're like, "Oh shit, they come in!" And he smashes a thing on the floor and manages to get. Also, he manages to get one of his mates out as well. Yeah, so you're like, so it's weird, isn't it? Because you have the blend of this movie of the realism of war, but then you have the completely unrealistic take of how that would actually happen. Irrelevant of the unrealistic side of where the story goes with, all these fucking the dead rising and going mental and being double R bastards and all that sort of stuff. But you get like the very unrealistic moments where like sometimes you're like that might take you out of it, or it becomes like laughable where you're like there's no way he'd be walking around here and surviving. And then I'm like, yeah, that's quite funny, but it's bad writing.
Yeah.
But like I said, when it does go heavy on the horror, like we've mentioned, it's really cool. You get a lot of really cool scenes with these monster mutant things that have been, brought back to life with this serum thing that these Nazis have been working on. Obviously, the main guy ramps himself up like mad, and he's got half of his face missing, which is obviously a fantastic. I mean, it looks better than the Two-Face in The Dark Knight. I mean, most things does anyway, but it's really well done. And yeah, so the effects in it are pretty gnarly. You've got one guy who's got like an arm off, but he's got like a really sharp bone, and he's using that as well. So it does have those moments where if you're somebody that likes like fight scenes and likes like horror and those moments and cool scenes like that, then yeah, it has got a lot of those moments in it as well. So even though it might take a while to get into them, when it does, it works really well.
I checked out the behind the scenes for this film around the special effects, and the creature you're talking about, I think they called him Mistake, was like his on-set name, the one with the messed up arm. He was 95% practical, and the only part they had to make CGI was the hand.
Oh, really? Well, they do a really good job because I didn't really notice too much. I didn't know if it was like a prosthetic, but then or whether they got somebody that was like had one arm, and then they do that trick obviously quite a lot in cinema. So it's quite interesting that they did it sort of practical mostly, and then CGI and a bit of it. And I'm pretty sure the making of this would be pretty cool. I should probably go back. I should go back and because there's so much to this movie, and it is a proper movie. That's one of the things I like about this movie is that it does feel like a proper movie, if that makes sense.
It feels like a big budget film for not having that big of a budget.
Yes, yeah, that's pretty much what I mean. Yeah. One of the things, obviously, so as we get to the end, obviously, look, they do save the day. Unfortunately, Wyatt Russell does die, but he dies in a very cool Snake Plissken, Kurt Russell way. He even has a line in it that I can't remember what it is, but it's very. Oh, what is it? He has he's starting like, I don't need this anymore, something like that, and then he throws his lighter.
It was the lighter.
Yeah, that's it.
And then he tells Boyce after he locks the gate, he's like, they shouldn't have this, and we shouldn't either.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
yeah. But it's gonna die down here with me.
Yeah.
So it's just he's so badass in this, and I love characters like that because they're just like you think to yourself like, are there real people like this that talk like this? And if they are, I want to meet them.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some soldiers out there that act like this. I doubt I would want to have a beer with them. They're probably rather intense individuals.
Yeah, exactly like that. It's it. You're like, oh, that's it for me. No, it's only just started. Next thing you know, you're in Bangkok with in a ring of fire in some sort of underground kumite or something like that.
And that dude's just screaming at you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. This is actually, I don't want to meet these people now. I've changed my mind. I wouldn't last in a kumite. The other thing that is a bit of a gripe, I suppose, is I don't like the ending to this. I like how we get to the end, like obviously the Wyatt Russell saying proper cheesy, like 80s Kurt Russell lines and so on. But it's the moment where you're like, oh, it's all good. And but it sort of, for me, it sort of almost ends too abrupt, where it's just like everybody's good now and we're done. I don't know. You might think the absolute opposite to me, but it just felt like we've had this big scene, and then the end, it comes very quickly, where they're like, it's all done. Is there anything down there? No, there's nothing there. Didn't think so. Here's your mates. They're still alive. He's still here going, oh, baseball, and all that sort of stuff. But then it ends, and you're like, oh, okay. Like I don't know. I felt like there should have been an extra step to get to that end.
I thought about this since watching the movie the other day, and the concept of most everybody lives besides the landmine guy and Wyatt, but everybody else lives, which is, I don't know how to say it, but I feel like they could have killed off a few more characters. That feels weird to say, but like for them to go into this Nazi compound and only Wyatt die seems a little strange to me.
Yeah.
They even save Jacob, who was the guy plugged up to the machines that he drags out of there. That dude lives somehow.
Weird. Yeah, he's absolutely fucking fine somehow.
Yeah, he's fine. I guess the one guy who which we don't really talk about too much, they try the serum on the one soldier who comes back to life and like begins. Oh
yeah, the photographer guy. Yeah,
the photographer. But to the end part there with how the general, I'm assuming that's what he was, asked, is there anything that we should go back and look at? If you think about how they had to advance into Europe, they probably didn't have time to dig anything up.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they were probably just like, we're there now. We're at the end of it. We don't need to go any further into things that we don't need to now. We need to, so it's mostly about going home, and ending it and going home and stuff like that. So it does make sense. And do you know what, to what you're saying about them, like, not dying or something like that, I think now, just sitting here, I would have really enjoyed if there was way more characters that we started with. And then it would have made sense. I think that's my problem. I think because we've got such a small group of characters in this war zone, you know what I mean? And essentially, like you say, like all of them survive, even the person that had a giant fucking rod in their stomach, with looked like a vacuum cleaner on it. But then the only one that dies is the one that I don't want to die. But he, it feels like it would have been better if, when the plane goes down, I felt like if we were on the journey with more people, if there was, say, like 10 of them or something like that, like 10 or 12 of them, and then it would have made the risks of the other ones, the remaining few that survived, it would have made that risk of them not surviving even more heightened, because you're like, oh shit, like more of them are getting picked off. Like, is there going to be any more of them that are going to die? But like you say, pretty much everybody we're joined with at the start, apart from a couple, they all survive somehow through an entire bloody German army and save the day.
If you think about like Friday the 13th, as those films went on, 4, 5, 6, the body count got crazy, and the people who were dying, nobody cared about. So just take a few notes from those films and just throw in some random bodies. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you're right. But yeah, so that's one of my only other critiques is the ending. But I think you're right. I think figuring it out now, I think it's just because we should have had more people, more characters at the start to begin with, to lose on the journey along the way, rather than this small group of people that somehow save the day against all odds. That's another Phil Collins reference in the same episode. There we go. And then also the other thing that I don't like is that we really uncharacteristically end on a fucking rap song on the credits, and I don't understand what that's about. Like, I don't know if it's the same for you guys over there, but basically the music as the movie ends, it's like a rap song.
It was. I cut the movie off as soon as it started. I didn't listen to it, but
it's so uncharacteristic, because you're like, this is like a war movie, like it's a movie about war, and then it becomes, about more than that, because obviously all the horror shit that happens, and then you put like a fucking like, it's not like the 90s, it's not Ninja Turtles, It's not like, or like the movies like that, or like a Freddy Krueger rap thing, like, and they've put like the mute like that. You can tell that that's like a producer's decision where they're like, oh, by the way, this is like a popular artist, so you're going to put this at the end of the movie, and they're like, but it's a war movie. They didn't have this type of music back then, and like normally a movie like this would end on like a score, like going into it and so on, but it just ends, and then you've got Overlord, and then you've got rapping and all that sort of stuff, and you're like, what a fucking weird song to have at the end of this movie.
It ends as though, like you said, to the Ninja Turtle piece, it ends like it was a horror film based in New York City. And
yes, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Everything got tied up in a knot, everybody's happy, and now we rap.
Yeah, that's it. So it's it's a really weird ending. I'm the same as you. As soon as like I hear it, I turn it off because it almost like lessens the impact of everything that happened before. Because then they're like, Overlord, motherfucker, like. So it's really weird to me. So there we go. So that's like a general conversation about Overlord. We're going to get into our overall thoughts in a minute. So if there's anything, Hootie, that you want to say more about, obviously we can get into it there as well. But that's like more of an in-depth conversation about what happens in the movie. There's some, obviously I always try and shove in some production info and facts. So the first one I've got is in an interview with Jimmy Fallon, Wyatt Russell said that he had mono, which is also known as the kissing disease, while filming, and that he lost around 25 pounds when he was making the movie. And you can actually see that. I didn't know that obviously until I watched the movie, but there's a few moments near the start of the movie where you can see him in the background a little bit, and he's like crazy skinny, like not like he is for like most of the movie. Like you can tell there's a different shift in his weight. It's like it's not far away from the bit with the landmine stuff around that sort of time. And he definitely noticeably looks thinner than he does like for a lot of the other movies. So I don't know. Apparently mono's the kissing disease, so I don't know who he's been kissing, but he probably regretted it.
I didn't pick up on that at all, but that's wild. Ironically enough, Predator, that entire crew got sick because they were drinking Montezuma's Revenge in Mexico, and I think Schwarzenegger lost like 25 pounds.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can sort of see it. I mean, it's sometimes more difficult to see on Schwarzenegger because he's the biggest bastard ever, but you can see it because it's more in the face.
His face in Predator is like unhumanly chiseled.
Yeah,
it's so like skin tight.
Yeah, I always say this, but I still believe that Predator's the best that he's ever looked. For me,
without question.
He's absolutely incredible. I'm not going to go into how much I love how beautiful fucking Schwarzenegger is in Predator. But yeah, it's crazy that you can see. So next time you watch it, you'll notice it. There are moments in it where you can see, and I don't know whether they purposely did it and had him in the background a bit more because he was probably like trying not to puke up or something. I don't know, but yeah, he lost 25 pounds, which is what, like 2 stone, I think. So around 2 stone. So it's quite a lot of weight to lose. And he's not a big guy already, so you can definitely see it. Yep. Operation Overlord, like you mentioned as well, to go back to what you said near the start, was the code name for the Allied operation for the Battle of Normandy, which launched the successful invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe. This, alongside Operation Neptune, would become known as D-Day, like you said as well. So it does have those sort of underlining realistic aspects of what where we are in the timeline of World War II. Obviously, as far as I know, there wasn't zombie mutant people that I know of. Initially, it was reported that the film would be, and I actually remember this as well, but it would be the 4th part of the Cloverfield film series. But on April 25th of whatever year it was, Abrams himself announced at CinemaCon that the film would not belong to the series. And I remember when there was the big buzz about how this could be another Cloverfield movie. But obviously, I think it was because obviously as soon as anything's announced that J.J. Abrams is doing, most of the time it's like, oh, it's going to be another Cloverfield movie, and it never ends up being it. Or if it is, they're really shit.
From what I understand is that he and the writer worked together on this, and it at the basis of it, they were supposedly trying to make it a Cloverfield film. But if you think about it, I don't know how it could have been a Cloverfield film because the creatures are so different.
Yeah. Yeah, they're so different. And as far as I know, I mean, I can't remember because obviously they did that, Paradox, which I think is like the sequel. I think it all comes from space, doesn't it? I think so. It's not like they can be like, we're creating these giant monsters in a lab in 1944. You know what I mean? like it doesn't work like that.
I guess if you would scrap the entire Nazi serum aspect of it and just made it that they were like holding these creatures in that chapel, maybe that's how you do it. But that's a whole other film.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I'm happy that we got what we got, and we didn't get like another Cloverfield that didn't work. As much as people constantly clamour for another Cloverfield movie, once again for me, that's the first one was that magic moment that they created, and then I like Cloverfield Lane. They did 10 Cloverfield Lane. I think that as a character piece, that's very good. It's when it becomes about Cloverfield, that's where it doesn't work. It's a bit like the Joker, the original Joker with Joaquin Phoenix. For me, the character side of that and the traumatic side of what it is what's interesting to me. The fact that it becomes a Joker movie that it shouldn't be isn't interesting to me, because it just felt like it should have never have been a Joker movie. And that's what I feel a bit like, with Cloverfield Lane and so on. It's like a very good idea, concept, story, but let's make it part of this Cloverfield world that it doesn't need part of. But they do that all the time. It's fucking Hollywood. They do shit like this all the time. And then the last one I've got is the climax of the film is set in real time. From the point that Ford says he's setting the explosives timer for 18 minutes until the church explodes is almost exactly 18 minutes. So that's cool. I like that fact that that's once again comes down to fantastic filmmaking, that they're like, let's try and actually, because how many times do we do it where they're like, we've got like 10 seconds and then it's an hour later.
That always strikes
or
me.
like, yeah, it's mad. It's like it says like you'll have like somebody presses something and it says 10 seconds, and then it cut away for 10 seconds and then come back, and then you've still got 7 seconds on the clock, and you're like, no, that's not how time works. Time doesn't work like that. Time is still relevant in movies and make it work, but they did apparently in this, so I'm not complaining. So there we go. That's some production info and facts. Overall thoughts on the movie. I always let my guests go first. So what's your overall thoughts on the movie, or if there's any other things about the movie that we didn't talk about that you want to know?
One piece I would talk about at the end there was Boyce says he's going to continue fighting the war across Europe. So I took that as like, were they trying to set up a sequel? We never got it, so we'll never know. But
oh yeah, of course, yeah,
could have been. But overall, Overlord held up to me after all these years. My memories of it was exactly what I thought it was going to be. And the acting is just good enough throughout. Chloe did her best, as we've talked about. But I would highly recommend that your audience goes and watch this film. If you go into it expecting a horror light film, like if you like Predator, like we've talked about, just highly recommend. It's not a hardcore horror film. It's not a Night of the Living Dead. It's not like a grotesque Terrifier. I see the mask behind you. It's not that kind of film. But if you just love well put together J.J. Abrams style films, it is a great film. It is a war film done with a big budget with horror elements that completely work. The special effects, I love to see practical effects in this century. Like we get it so seldom. And I think that's why, like to the point about Terrifier, that's why Terrifier is so popular, because most of that's practical effects, which is very appreciated. So to wrap up my review of Overlord, go watch it. It holds up, and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's just, this is a movie that, like I've mentioned as well, like I can see why people were put off by this movie, and I can see why this is a movie that where we're talking about it, and so many other people have no idea about it because it sort of flew under the radar for a lot of people because it's it's a war movie, and not everybody wants to watch war movies and movies about that sort of stuff. Like it can be seen as an acquired taste. But also, the other difficulty that the movie has is that it is billed as an action horror, but yet the horror elements of it don't come until like an hour or so into the movie. So it becomes about its identity of how the movie's identity and how it puts out there for people. I think is what hurts the movie in regards to how many people have watched it, because straight away people go, well, it's a war movie. Well, actually it's a horror action movie. Oh, okay, how much horror is in it? Not much. But so then you're like, okay, so what is the audience for this movie? So I say for people out there that the audience for this movie for me is, and like I mentioned, is if you are somebody that enjoys cinema. That's for me where I think this audience, irrelevant of horror, irrelevant of war movies or something like that. I think that if you're somebody that enjoys horror, if you enjoy cinema, if you're somebody that enjoys a journey of a group of people that go from A, B to C, to see if they're going to how they start, to see if they're going to save the day. I think it's a very exciting movie. It's exciting to see where it's going to go. I like the unpredictability of it. And also and I've mentioned quite a lot throughout this as well, and you said it as well, this is a very, very well-made movie. Like a really well-made movie. So from the start to the finish, it's very well put together. The shots are very nice. The sound design is absolutely fantastic. So as a movie itself, for people who like those moments as well, where you're like, whether you're people out there who are aspiring filmmakers and want to watch something that can be quite inspiring as a movie on its own, on a technical level, then you have this from the movie as well. So it's a very well-made movie on a technical level. It's a very well movie in regards to where you go on the journey. Like I've said, there are problems within the movie, but then most movies all have problems. And that's just the way that it is. And, I'm always going to find problems with movies because that's just the type of person I am. But overall, I really, truly enjoy Overlord. Obviously, if you're watching or listening to this, I would hope that you've seen it. If you haven't, then make sure you go and watch it either way. If we've completely spoiled it for you, that's on you. But yeah, you just go and enjoy it, because I do think that this is a really, really good movie that, like Hootie as well, that when I watched it for the second time, it didn't, the fact that I'd seen it before and I sort of knew what happened, I was just like, okay, like knowing what happens doesn't lessen the impact of what happens in this movie. You're still happy to be on this journey with these people and then go, I know where it's going, but it's still an enjoyable movie. And I think I said to you as well, I might have said it off camera or whatever, but it is a movie that, like, it's one that I will probably, like, not watch for, say, like, a couple of years, like 2 or 3 years or so. And then I might go, I'll go back to it and try and forget as much as possible, and then go, oh, yeah, no, it is really, really well done. So it's a really good movie, very well put together. We both really recommend it, and that's why we wanted to do an episode about it, because, yeah, when it was on the list, I was just like, no one talks about this movie. And like you said, Hootie, we don't really know why. There might be reasons why, but to not at least give it a try and give it a go, that's, I think, what's criminal about the cinema industry, is that people, because of the way films are marketed or put out there, sometimes people are like, I don't want to watch a war movie, or I don't want to watch a movie that takes an hour to get into it. Whereas if you actually give it a chance, then you're like, oh shit, like this is actually really good, and I should have given it a chance. And if you do give it a chance, I don't think you'd be disappointed. It's a really bloody good one. Your first time. That's the segment on the show that I do, that I almost forgot that I do. That is where you amazing people out there, whether you listen to the show or not, I mean, it's essentially free promo. You send me over your first time horror movie memory, and then I read it out on the show. This one, I'm only putting one in here. Sometimes I do one, sometimes I do a couple. This one I'm going to go through as quick as I can because this one is an actual like story that was sent over to me essentially of everything, of the accounts of everything that happened. It was a great read. And I'm going to read it all out for you. I think it was sent over in 2 separate messages on Instagram. So we will get through it, but it's a great memory, and thank you. So thank you to Hannah, who is the horror horror underscore geek underscore 1987 on Instagram. So you can go and follow them over there. Make sure you do. But she put that I was taken by my parents to see Jurassic Park. We've already mentioned that. Obviously, as well, Jurassic Park, I'm not saying it's a horror movie, but this is just a horrible experience. It's more about the experience rather than the fact that it's a horror movie that it's not. I was about 5 at the time, and all I remember is when the T-Rex came onto the screen. In the car scene with the children and the driver running away to the Portaloo, which, by the way, because of that scene, I'm extremely hesitant in using them. I mean, I'm hesitant in using them anyway because they're gross. I absolutely screamed the cinema down. I was in hysterics. Some people in the cinema were complaining, and a worker came in and told my dad he was going to have to take me out. So he must have done, because I don't remember anything until going back in and that kitchen scene with the smaller dinosaurs, which are the velociraptors. And then I must have been taken out again. I remember a family staring at us because of how bad I was. I will add this. She will add this, that a few later we went to a museum, not sure which one, and we was on the top floor. And there was a massive middle bit, and there was a dinosaur skeleton built up life size, and it moved its head in my direction, and it was round 2 all over again. Now, since being an adult, I have watched it only but in parts, in bit parts, because it was way too scary. All the memories came flooding back. I have seen bits of Lost World, and that is scary too. Jurassic Park 3 I have seen, and it isn't all that bad, and it's not great. Still get scared, and then the other year on Boxing Day, Jurassic World was on TV, and my son wanted to watch it, and well, I stood at the door with a pillow covering my eyes. As I am now a lot older, I need to conquer this fear because these films, from a cinematic view, are bloody brilliant. So in the near future, I will conquer this and watch them all. So there we go. It's a long one, but it's all about the nightmare, the horror of what Jurassic Park gave to her life rather than the movie itself.
That is an awesome story. I mean, Jurassic Park, the first one was terrifying to a child. It terrified me.
Yeah, absolutely. It is funny how, like, obviously we look at it now and it's like, oh, it's like a Spielberg movie, you know, like classic Spielberg. But as a kid, you're right, you know, seeing these giant fucking T-Rexes on screen, you know, you're like, shit. Is a dinosaur's fucking real? And then you start, you know, you shit yourself. So it's easy to fucking, you know, think that these fucking dinosaurs are real and they're terrifying.
And if you ever see a glass of water anywhere in your life that rattles, you're like, oh God.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, as well, I can't help but take my dog for a walk, and when he does an oversized turd, I'm like, that's a big pile of shit. So thanks, Jeff Goldblum. So there we go. So if anybody out there, if you want your first time memory read on the show, just send it over. Go into any of our social media platforms, whatever you're on, we'll be on them. And then you just literally send me a DM with all of yours detailed. And then I will read it out on the show. Like I said, it's a bit of fun to read out to all of you, but also it's interesting to know where everybody's journey starts. And also a little bit of trauma is always a little bit of fun as well. So there we go. So that's everything about Overlord. That is a first-time horror movie memory. Hootie, now is your time to promote the absolute shit out of everything that you have going on.
We are not the best at this, but I will do my best here.
You and me both.
I am a part of the Horrible Film School. Bit of a long title. We are a 3-man horror podcast that are coming up on our 100th episode here in a few weeks. So pretty excited about that. Nice. So I think we're going to put out like not a survey, but a request for 100th episode coverage. So be looking for that. And you can find us at horriblefilmschool.com. That'll have all of our link trees and all of our merch store and Instagram. Pretty active on Instagram. Horrible Film School on Instagram as well. Just started a TikTok page, not as active on there, but we are on there occasionally. So come check us out.
There we go. So make sure everybody does. There's a lot of podcasts out there. I say this all the time. There's a lot of podcasts out there, and not all of them are great. And sometimes there are ones that are very good, that are really enjoyable. That I love podcasts where you've got people who are really talking about things that they truly enjoy and they truly love. It's not just put out there to go like, I'm making a podcast and here we go. Like, you create a podcast. Ones that I love are where I'm listening to it or watching it, where I can tell that these people that are doing it, like their foremost reason for the show is talking about something they truly enjoy, and then putting that experience out there and hope that people out there enjoy it. And that's what your podcast, and obviously with your co-host as well, that's what the show is like. It's where you're sitting there having these obviously great conversations, honest conversations about whatever it is you're talking about, and then you're putting that out there. You're not just creating a podcast, you're creating an experience for people to enjoy a very good conversation. So everybody, you need to go and listen to the show that I always get wrong, the Horror Ball Film School podcast.
Nailed it.
I'm going to get better at it. I'll get in better. But yeah, obviously in any podcast platform, on the socials, make sure you go and support everything that Hootie and his co-host and the podcast does. Because I enjoy it, and I just love conversations. I love conversations that you have. I love listening to people's very honest conversations about something in the world of horror, in the world of cinema, and obviously, Hootie does that very well. And it's always an absolute pleasure having you on the show, getting to listen to your beautiful Southern voice.
We all sound like this. All three of us sound like southeastern people from the United States. And I just want to say thank you for having me on the show today. So.
Oh no, absolutely. Anytime, you will always be welcome as a guest on the show. So thank you so much for coming back on again. And if anybody wants to check out the other episode we did, we spoke about it a little bit before as well. But Hootie was on my first ever video podcast that we did, all about another amazing movie called The Frighteners, which is a fantastic movie. If nobody's ever seen that, you have to. It's a fucking great movie. Michael J. Fox, everyone, just great movie. But that was like the start of an era of the channel. So you were there at the start of like an era where everything was changing of the channel, and now we're here, at the start of 2025 now. And you're here for another start of the year, another part of the era of Let's Talk Horror. So thank you for being here.
It sounds like when I come on the show, we find really unseen niche horror films. So I got to keep that up if I ever come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when you send those lists over, I will purposely make sure that we're talking about movies that people don't really know about, but yet you fucking should, because they're brilliant. Like, we don't talk about movies where people haven't seen them because they're shit. We talk about movies that are really, really good that people should be watching. Maybe one day we'll do a really shit one. I don't know.
We'll do Ghost Ship one day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, films that are so shit they're good. That's it. Well, that's it. So there we go. To close off the show, as usual, with the Let's Talk Horror channel, with the Let's Talk Horror podcast. A big thank you to my patrons. I always say on the show, my honorary creepazoids. You've got the Flicks and Friends podcast. You've got Jamie Burns, a.k.a. the Disco Doctor of Death. You've got Rob Miller and Leighton Collins. They are my creepazoids, my Patreon absolute legends over there that are helping me go above and beyond on this journey. Really, truly helping me out. It means the world to me. If anybody else wants to know anything more about Patreon, just go to patreon.com. Search for the Let's Talk Horror channel. And in fact, almost any show out there that you love, whether it's a YouTube channel or podcast, anything like that, most of the time they will have like a Patreon as well. So don't just look at mine. You can look at any show that you enjoy, and then they might have a Patreon, and then you can help out their journey as well as mine if you want to a little bit more. Because I want to keep on this journey, and you will play the biggest part in all of that. We're on all the socials. Make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel If you're watching this, if you're listening to this on whatever platform you're listening to it on, whether it's Spotify, Apple, whichever one, please make sure that you review it 5 stars. Don't put anything less. Don't be a fucking douchebag and put something less. I will find you. Do the 5 stars because it truly, honestly helps the shows with evolving and so on, helping us reach new audiences by them finding us through ratings review, and obviously make sure you do that the same as well for the Horrible Film School podcast as well. I separate it because I'm so dumb, my brain can't get it all in one, so it's like I can't say it all properly. But there we go. So until next time, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to seeing what 2025 brings. So onwards and upwards, hopefully, unless it's onwards or not onwards and downwards. I don't know. We'll see what fucking happens. We'll see what 2025 brings. But for now, I'm here and Hootie's been with me talking about a bloody good film that none of you know about and that you should do. So there we go. Until next time, stay creepy, fuckers.